This movie is based on a true story. Everyone loves Martin McNeil, a distinguished doctor and lawyer. Alexis, Martin's daughter, proudly presented him with the Teacher of the Year award at Sunday school. All the invited guests applauded. Martin gave a speech from the stage, dedicating the award to his daughters and his wife Michelle. After the event, Martin drove the family home, saying he had more to do at the clinic. Michelle doesn't understand what her husband could have to do on Sunday at the clinic. Lately he's been disappearing frequently. Alexis, who plans to follow in her father's footsteps and become a doctor, doesn't notice this since she studies in Nevada and rarely visits home. Michelle suspects that her husband has a lover and asks her daughter to obtain the father's call records. Alexis said that it sounded like paranoia. The girl is doing an internship at the father's clinic. When Martin received a call, he stepped aside and had a pleasant conversation with someone. This prompted Alexis print out the father's call records after all. One name raised suspicions. Alexis showed the printouts to her mother. Seeing how many calls were made at night, Michelle became convinced that her husband was unfaithful. Alexis, however, continues to hope there's an explanation. In the evening, Michelle demanded that her husband explain who Julianne Willis was. Martin responded that this woman was renting their house in Utah after the previous tenants had moved out. Of course, Michelle was not satisfied with this explanation, as her husband was constantly staying late at work. Martin had to admit that he had melanoma. He didn't want to worry the family, so he hadn't mentioned it. It seemed that the passion and tenderness in their relationship had returned. Alexis was very happy for her parents. When Martin went to his doctor's appointment, Michelle shared with the daughter her plan to get a facelift. Alexis didn't think it was a good idea, but 50-year-old Michelle wanted to keep up with her handsome husband. Soon, she was on the operating table. When the procedure was over, Martin insisted that his wife be given more sedatives because she hadn't slept for a week before the surgery due to anxiety. Martin also insisted that Michelle be discharged immediately for further recovery at home. Michelle was in constant pain. Alexis liked what was happening less and less. While Martin was away, Alexis took care of her mother. The only thing keeping Michelle going now was pain medication. Some time passed after the surgery, and Michelle started feeling better. The husband called her beautiful and left again, supposedly for another doctor's appointment. Alexis was about to move back to Nevada. Michelle still suspected that the husband was cheating on her, though Alexis was sure that wasn't the case because the father was undergoing treatment, working a lot and taking care of his daughters. By the way, all except Alexis were adopted children in the McNeil family. Later, Martin helped the daughter load her things into a taxi. He couldn't stop thinking about his illness, unable to imagine how his family would manage without him. Alexis said goodbye to her family and left. The next day during class, Alexis saw many missed calls from the father. Hearing that her mother was gone, Alexis couldn't believe it. Recovering from the initial shock, the girl immediately returned home and rushed to the parents' bedroom. The father explained that it was an accident. Michelle had likely fallen when she bent down to retrieve the plug from the bathtub drain. Martin broke down in tears, blaming himself. Barely holding back her emotions, Alexis said that it wasn't his fault. Now she felt that she had to see her mother. Martin tried to dissuade her, but she went to the morgue anyway. Only then did Alexis fully realize that her mother was gone. Some time later, a police officer informed her that the death was due to natural causes, not an accident or the effects of the surgery. The medical report confirmed this. Alexis is puzzled by how this could be and requested a toxicology report. Now Alexis takes on the role of mother to her younger sisters, as it would be difficult for the father to manage alone. In the evening, Alexis saw the father searching for his late wife's address book. He wanted to find the Miller's number and personally inform them of the tragic news, as they were very fond of Michelle. Alexis joined the search and discovered pills prescribed to Olivia by the father. Alexis had no idea that her younger sister had attention deficit disorder. Martin confessed that the pills were not for Olivia but for himself. Since Martin was diagnosed, his energy had vanished. Alexis wants to drop out of university to help her father raise the sisters, but Martin cannot allow his daughter to sacrifice her own life for this. Linda, Michelle's sister, went to the police station to speak with the person handling the investigation. The funeral took place. Martin gave a touching speech, saying how much he loved his wife. Linda hugged her nieces. Alexis said she had been so busy preparing for the funeral that she simply hadn't had time to mourn her mother. Seeing Martin talking to some woman, Linda told the niece that there was a lot she didn't know about her father. However, Alexis didn't want to discuss it at that moment. Linda is certain that Martin has something to hide. After putting the sisters to bed, Alexis made coffee for herself and the father. He plans to hire a nanny so that his eldest daughter can continue her studies. Soon a woman approached them on the street, introducing herself as Gypsy. She was a former patient of Martin's. Upon learning that Gypsy was a professional nanny, Martin immediately offered her a job. Alexis didn't like how quickly the father made the decision, but Martin assured that Gypsy had excellent references. Alexis showed the new nanny around the house and explained where everything was. When Alexis talked about her younger sister's needs, Gypsy responded indifferently. She clearly didn't care about the girls. Alexis demanded Gypsy's documents, suspecting that she was the woman her father had been talking to all along. Then Alexis called Linda, asking what she had wanted to tell her about the father. Linda revealed that Martin didn't actually have cancer. Alexis immediately went to her aunt's place. They had already managed to figure out that Gypsy was in fact Julianne Willis. Linda always knew that Martin wasn't the right man for her sister. Martin knows how to charm people and skillfully uses it to his advantage. Linda also knows that in the past, Martin had stolen the identities of deceased people and opened bank accounts in their names. Michelle knew about this but believed that everyone has the right to make mistakes. Linda has reasons to believe that Martin may be involved in Michelle's demise, but the police didn't believe her. That night, Alexis stayed at the aunt's house. The next morning, she returned home and demanded her father explain why he faked his illness and presented Julianne Willis as Gypsy, the nanny. Martin made it clear that he sets the rules in this house. Alexis had to leave. Now Linda's home is the only place where Alexis can feel safe. As a former insurance agent, Linda has connections and managed to find out that Gypsy is hiding huge debts. Alexis is trying to figure out how to protect her sisters. She left the father a voicemail apologizing, but Martin ignored all her messages and calls. However, one day Martin did respond, setting a condition for Alexis: she could return home only if she accepted Gypsy. Alexis pretended to agree. Martin congratulated his daughter on her return, saying that the girls now have a wonderful mother. Gypsy took over Alexis's room and made it clear that she had no intention of taking care of the girls. Gypsy feels like the mistress of the house, and Alexis was forced to accept this to stay close to her sisters. In the evening, Alexis found her father crying. He kept repeating how much he missed his wife. Everything in this house reminds him of Michelle, so he asked his daughter for help in getting rid of her belongings. Of course, Alexis didn't want to do that. The next morning, Martin, looking chipper, suggested that the family take a trip together. Alexis agreed on the condition that Gypsy wouldn't come with them. Martin was fine with that. However, he wanted Alexis to send Olivia to another country to visit her relatives before they left for California. Martin intended to keep Olivia's passport. In the evening at the hotel, Alexis tried to put her sisters to bed. The girls were excited, anticipating the trip to California. At night, Alexis felt anxious. The father's behavior was becoming increasingly unpredictable. Martin tried to convince his daughter that she was losing her mind. Eventually, he came up with an excuse not to take his eldest daughter on the family vacation. Alexis couldn't understand why her father was willing to destroy everything they had. All Alexis wants now is to protect her sisters. But Martin made it clear to his eldest daughter that she would not succeed. Alexis couldn't believe the father left her in an unfamiliar place near some hotel. In tears, she called Linda. Now Alexis has no doubt that her father is somehow involved in her mother's demise. 3 weeks later, Alexis and Linda approached social services with the intent of removing Martin's custody over the daughters. However, without solid evidence, the child welfare authorities were powerless to do anything. Alexis continues to insist that her father is dangerous. Linda confirmed this, but it wasn't enough. Martin is a respected man with an impeccable reputation, and everyone would be more likely to believe him than resentful hurt daughter. Linda advised the niece to think like her father, as he raised her as his protege. 3 days later in Nevada, Alexis received a call from her father, who said he intended to transfer custody of the girls to the Millers. This prompted Alexis to rush to the Millers' house. She knocked on the door for a long time, but no one answered. Alexis was completely unprepared to see her father here, who smirked and said it would be better for the girls. Any attempts by Alexis to threaten him only made Martin laugh. He commands unconditional respect from those around him and knows he can get away with anything. In a fit of helpless rage, Alexis shouted at her father that she knew all about his crimes. When Martin threatened to call the police, Alexis had to leave. She then received a call from the medical examiner. The toxicology report was ready. It was revealed that an elevated dose of medication was found in Michelle's body. And this wasn't the only oddity. Alexis and Linda are convinced that this evidence is enough to hold Martin accountable. The next day, niece and aunt brought the toxicology report to the police station, but the officer didn't care, nor did the prosecutor. Alexis is on the verge of despair, but Linda encouraged her. They must not give up. Alexis went to the Millers to check on her sisters. Mrs. Miller just wants to help, knowing that Martin plans to send all the girls back to their homeland, just like Olivia. Alexis wasn't surprised at all to see Gypsy in the house. Apparently she wasn't going to move out. Alexis wants the father to transfer temporary custody of the girls to her. By the way, he still hasn't given the Millers his consent. Alexis is no longer willing to tolerate Gypsy in the house. Martin assured that there was nothing between him and Gypsy, he simply gave her a roof over her head in exchange for cleaning and cooking. Martin finally signed the temporary custody papers, but he said the end was far from over. Alexis has secured her sisters, but she is also determined to seek justice for her mother. In the middle of the night the father showed up, terrifying the girls. Martin already knows that his daughter is trying to accuse him of taking her mother's life. Alexis threatened to call the police, then hugged her sisters, telling them they would move to another hotel. Of course Alexis understands that the father will find them anywhere. Nevertheless, she refuses to back down and ignores his calls. However, after thinking it over, Alexis called him back. Martin apologized to his daughter and assured her that he did not harm Michelle. He said they were all going through a difficult time and were making irrational decisions under the influence of grief. Alexis wants to believe her father, but she cannot. Soon after, Linda came directly to the university where Alexis was studying. Linda had bad news, the court refused to press charges against Martin. Linda believes that temporary custody of the girls is not a viable option. Alexis must gain full parental rights. Then together they will figure out how to get Martin into prison. One of the detectives reviewed the case files again, and the circumstances of Michelle's demise seemed suspicious to him. Now as the official guardian of the girls, Alexis is taking on the role of their mother. Linda is very proud of her niece. Finally they were able to contact Olivia, who desperately wants to return to her sisters. Alexis promised Olivia that they would bring her back soon. Alexis and Linda went to Martin and demanded he hand over Olivia's passport, but he refused, saying it would be better for Olivia to stay in her homeland. However, when Linda and Alexis threatened to involve social services, Martin relented and returned the passport. Then aunt and niece met Cal, a retired detective at a cafe. He had found something that would shock Alexis and Linda. It turned out that Martin never graduated from university, his diploma was fake. This might not be enough to put Martin behind bars, so they needed more serious charges. While going through the documents, Linda realized that Martin had illegally changed Olivia's name to Julianne. Through this fraudulent scheme, he intended to write off Gypsy's debts, who was also officially named Julianne. Martin and Gypsy were arrested for identity theft. Alexis approached her father and triumphantly declared that she no longer wanted to become like him. Unlike her father, she would become a real doctor. Martin realized that his daughter had outplayed him. He tried to evoke her pity, but Alexis was resolute. 3 years passed. Alexis met with Cal in a cafe. Together they had succeeded in getting the coroner's report reopened, and today, Martin would be charged. The trial took place. Martin stared at his daughter with hatred. Alexis testified, stating that her father had added medication to her mother's breakfast. The pills didn't take effect immediately, so Martin left the house, believing this would give him a solid alibi. As Alexis recounted her version of events, she couldn't hold back her tears. This story caused a stir in the press, given that Martin had pretended to be both a lawyer and a doctor all these years. By this time, 6 years had passed since Michelle's demise. The jury found Martin guilty. Upon hearing the verdict, Alexis and Linda sighed with relief. Finally, justice had been served for Michelle, and Martin had received his due. 3 years later, Alexis as usual brought flowers to her mother's grave. It has now been 10 years since Michelle passed away. Today Martin voluntarily passed away in prison. Alexis still struggles to come to terms with the truth about her father. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.